Folks who live today just assume that Carrolls Creek Baptist Church has always been here. But in 1842, there were some humble beginnings. 18 Baptist individuals decided that they needed a presence in this area of the county. They decided to come together to create a church. And that church has the same biblical foundations that we still hold true to today. They started down by Carrolls Creek, 5 miles north of Tuscaloosa, in a borrowed building that the Grange owned.
One of my brothers and I are the only two in the church that ever went to the Grange building.
I remember a little about the lodge. It was a meeting place for different groups of men. They gave us permission to use it as a church. They named it Carrolls Creek Baptist Church.
Very often, in those days, being a rural community, we just fall in the back of the pickup truck barefooted and come to church.
We lived about 2 city blocks from the church, so we walked to the church.
I remember it distinctly, but it burned while we were moved several miles away.
We started coming to church here at LaFoy School, and that was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
And then the county sold the building to our church group in 1942.
It was a very small rural community church. A lot of people that were still farmers and blue-collar workers.
We had a lot of meetings here, and we had a bathroom out back in the spring we drink out of, right out to the side of the church, you know.
And had a kitchen, no partitions, and so for Sunday school rooms we used curtains, partitioned it off with curtains.
Lots of fans were being used by the women. Kids laid out on the benches just burning up.
We knew everybody that went up and down the highway. We called it Crab Road, Highway 69 now, but I can remember we would sit on one of my friend's porch down the road, and we knew everybody that went up the road, there goes so-and-so.
We first moved into the community, and I dressed like I was going to the Baptist church in Birmingham. Everybody else was in overalls or you know, like country people dress. But anyway, we sat down and everybody looked around at us and they didn't say a word. We got in the car and I said, Bill, we're going back next Sunday and we're not going to dress like we did this Sunday. So we did, and everyone came up and spoke to us and they hugged us and we knew we were right where we belonged.
Church service were very traditional, very typical pastors that were good, solid, spiritual men that led the church.
I remember growing up in it. It was so much fun and wonderful seeing so many people receive Christ and just so many activities for this community. It made it a focal point for our entire community.
We didn't have a regular piano player. It was, one time there was a woman who lived in the community and she knew a few songs. I loved it, you know, just loved it, but we only had a few songs we could sing. We had no special song director. We had 2 men who normally got up and led the singing. And if they weren't there, then somebody out of the audience would get up and leave.
I can still hear the prayers of some of the older men in the church when I was just a kid. Mr. Hugh Spencer, who had a deep voice, and you just couldn't miss his prayer.
We did have a choir, but I don't think we ever practiced. We'd just sit over and say, this is the choir, or on Sunday morning come up here and sing in the choir.
I do remember one other, the prayer of What Hamner. What was just a hard-working cement pouring man, but he would pray the most humble prayers, and always made me somewhat ashamed of the prayers that I prayed, and when I could hear the sincerity in the prayers that he prayed.
And everybody enjoyed one another. It was just like a family, really, our church was.
We were blessed not to have grown up when they had TV all the time. We all didn't have phones, and that brought us together to be at church and also fellowship, because when church was over, we would stand out in the yard sometimes for 30, 40 minutes, everyone talking before we'd go home for lunch.
And they were very spiritual people that were here and loved the Lord just like the congregation does today.